All right, welcome back, everybody. Been a 2-week break here on live shows. We did a replay of the tech security show in light of the CDK breach, and last week was the 4th of July. So I hope everybody had a great holiday. I am here this week with Austin Conroy. We were going to have Jeff Daniel, but he has gotten tied up at the store, and obviously the store comes first. So before we get started this week, we are sponsored by Intellicheck. And this episode is brought to you by Intellicheck. Do you know the pain points that caused customers to leave? Would you like to know if your advisors are offering to book your appointments, quoting prices, and interacting with your customers as you expect? With Intellicheck, you can know it all and have a plan to fix it. Thank you to Intellicheck. So this week, as always, we go through 3 segments. The first segment is going to be, what is it we want the pay plan to do? Segment 2 is, how do we design an effective pay plan? And segment 3 is going to be takeaways that you'll be able to use going back to your stores to hopefully make your pay plans work better for the teams. And so pay plans are a double-edged sword, right, Austin? They can drive significant improvements in productivity and engagement if they're designed thoughtfully, but they can also lead to stress and unethical behavior if mismanaged. Employers, we have to strike a balance between ensuring that the incentive structure enhances both extrinsic and intrinsic motivation while fostering ethical, supportive, and customer-centric work environment. And so Austin Conroy, Regional Fixed Ops Director from the Rohrman Automotive Group. Welcome to the Fixed Ops Mastermind. Welcome back, actually, to the Fixed Ops Mastermind. Great to have you here. And so we often hear about understanding our team and understanding what motivates them and things. The pay plan is really an extrinsic motivation, right? It's an outside motivator. But sometimes we have employees that want to be able to give a customer an incredible experience. But there's something that we've put in the pay plan that holds them back from really doing that. And so in putting those features in the pay plan, we've actually overridden their willingness to do a great job, right? They really want to take care of a customer, but they don't, because they realize that it would significantly impact their pay, which hurts their families. So starting off, nice, simple subject. How do we balance this? How do we work around this?
You'll notice, I think I'm the only one crazy enough to jump on a live show and talk about pay plans, first of all. So
that's right.
And then just a shout out to the Intellicheck. That's cool to see them sponsoring the show. That is a really neat tool. So if people haven't had experience with that, I got experience with that a couple months ago. And it's pretty cool. But yeah, so as far as pay plans, I think as you were telling the story, one of the examples came to mind, the advisor role that, we've had so many different pay plans for that role. But one of the light bulb moments for me was, a lot of these customers come into our drive and they need tire pressure. They need a tire pressure check, and maybe a porter's not available. And so the advisor, on prior pay plans that we had, the advisor's like, well, I'm not making money for this. I'm not making any money. I could be answering the phone. I could be greeting this customer. So, they have a point, right? And so we've helped kind of mix our pay plans just to say, hey, we realize there's parts of a job, and I think you have to assign a percentage of it. What percentage of the job is not necessarily going to be a revenue producing part of the job. I started back in the day at a $400 draw on the sales floor, right? I mean, that role is you eat what you kill. The advisor role, not necessarily. There's a lot of things that they do that they don't necessarily directly get compensated for. So that's what we've, at least in that pay plan, we've really tried over the years to strike a good balance to where, they feel comfortable coming into work, but then they also feel rewarded on the sales side of it. So, and I think you see that now bleeding into other roles like technicians. where the technicians are generally a flat rate, but experimenting with what if we give them an hourly plus some flat rate on top of that. And
Mhm.
we've seen some really good strides with that in our like 1 to 3 year technician bucket, which seems to be where we lose a lot of technicians in that area. So
Yeah.
and then kind of last point on that, just as a brief overview, I think the parts department is one that doesn't get talked about enough in terms of their pay
Mhm.
plan. And so one of the ways we tried to divide the silo is, trying to give them a piece of the service business as well. So,
Yeah.
we can go a little bit deeper into, I guess, some of those strategies that we've tried.
Mhm.
But yeah, overall, you want to be careful because we like to treat everything like 100% commission job. And I think when we get from variable to fixed, you got to change your mindset a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So in segment 2, we'll dive a little deeper into the parts department
Sure.
part of it. I did some things with parts pay plans also, and definitely parts is a lot of times the forgotten person in fixed ops, right? And that's such an important position, and involving them in that production and productivity schedule
Mhm.
helps a lot. Um, and so I'll talk about motivation again. So the
Sure.
extrinsic motivation of the incentive that we put in place, right?
Mhm.
We talked about how that can crowd out the intrinsic motivation. But let's talk about it. It's not motivation I wanted risk is the word I was looking for.
Okay.
So in life, there are people who are risk averse and people who are not or less are
Mhm.
risk averse, right?
Mhm.
And so we look at the pay plans that we've had, and you just mentioned flat rate for technicians and that
Mhm.
1 to 3 year period where you lose technicians. A lot of times we're losing them because they're worried about actually making a paycheck, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes very
Yeah.
rightfully so, right?
Yeah.
Because we have historically paid them flat rate where they,
Mhm.
as you mentioned when you started on the sales floor, you eat what you kill, right?
Mhm.
And yet they haven't built up the skills yet to kill anything or to kill
Yeah.
enough to live on.
Yeah.
Um, and so how do we work with the people that aren't as risk averse, right? You're taking it a service advisor and putting him on the desk and saying, hey, here's your compensation plan. You're going to be paid X percentage for this, X percentage for this, X percentage for this, and at
Mhm.
the end of the month, if you do these numbers, you'll make this much.
Yeah.
And the advisor says, okay, well, what if I don't make that much? What if I don't hit those numbers?
Yeah.
Right. And if they're a risk averse person and they're somebody who was, maybe you went and got them because they were incredible at customer service, but they hadn't
Mhm.
worked in automotive. And now they come in there and they're risk averse and they're not going to tell you, hey, I really don't like risk. They're just going to go, yeah, this doesn't sound like the job for me. And
Yeah.
maybe your greatest advisor walks out the door because of that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so what types of plans can we use that can still benefit the organization, right?
Yeah.
They can benefit the employee and also benefit the customer because in the end, we need the customers to come in and do the work on their cars, spend the money, but all of that has to be balanced. The company has to
Yeah.
make money, the employee has to be able to feed their family, and it has to be a charge that the customer is willing to pay.
Yeah, I mean, I think I love that you use the word risk, because with any hire or any employment situation, there is risk, right? Because
Mhm.
I don't know who someone is day one when they start, and they don't know who we are either to the same token. So, I think when you talk about risk and maybe somebody is a little more risk adverse getting on, to a pay plan, or maybe they're new to a position, I think that's where the employer really has to take the risk to invest in that person and say, hey, let's put some time frames on this, but in 6 months, here's what it looks like for you. In 12 months, here's what it looks like for you. I think the easiest example is the flat rate technician employee, because with flat rate, we can start them out hourly, and then in 6 months, we can evaluate, make sure they are turning hours on their own, and we can really kind of baby step them off of a more salary or hourly pay plan, and pop them onto more of a flat rate production, but only when they're ready for it. We have master technicians that are 20, 30 years in the business, and they still worry about the flat rate and still worry about the money's coming from. So, it's definitely something you need to be aware of as an employer and as a company. And I think that specifically for fixed operations roles, you have a lot of still this variable mindset to them where it is, like I mentioned when I started, it was $400 draw, per week selling cars, and it's like sink or swim. But, we have to treat these fixed ops roles differently because, the level of talent that's out there, we're having to grow people that are coming from gas stations, from Jimmy John's, from, you name it, restaurants, bartenders. It takes some time for them to learn the role. I know the NADA put something out a while ago. It was like 3 to 5 years for a service advisor to be, really proficient at their job. And that stat really blew me away.
Yeah.
So first of all, are we hiring the kind of people that we want to invest in up front? Let's say we're going to have to pay them X amount of salary with no commission for 6 months,
Yep.
and then gradually, train them and get them on a more of a commission pay plan. And I think that's where we've really missed the boat. And I think why a lot of people, they may have some great jobs that, I'm just going to throw some numbers out there, they're paying $50,000 to $70,000, and they're going to step into a role like this where we're paying them a $800 a month salary and commission. They're just not going to do it, right? So.
Right.
I think that's an area where we really need to wake up and revise, those pay plans, and at least just add some flexibility to it, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so if we look at that from the shop, is the two words that always drove me nuts: unapplied labor, right?
Yeah.
So you're basically saying that you can't be paying somebody to come in and learn the job and then get trained and be ready to be that next great technician a few years down the road.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's such that thinking is such a short-sighted, it's such a variable mindset where it's month to month to month to month.
Right.
And, fixed operations, these departments take a long time to grow. You can also kill them very quickly. Again,
Sure.
you look at these technicians, like if we get them past the 3-year mark, we have a lot of success in keeping them long-term. So what are we going to do to get them in? And are we confident enough that we can train them in 3 years to be a flat rate employee, to be certified? Are we hiring the kind of people that we want to invest in and do that? And unapplied labor is going to come along the way. It just is,
Yeah.
like I don't know. I look at more as like a training expense. So obviously, we want these technicians to be producing hours as quick as they can, but I'm not expecting a lube tech their first month in the business to be producing 40 hours. Or even 30 hours. Like,
Right.
Let's baby step it. Let's make sure we have a development plan in place, which, oh, by the way, is going to help retention. When that employee knows, hey, here's my plan for the next 3 months, 6 months, year down the road, here's where they want me to be. I can get there. That's reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been really good in the past about doing that to people that we bring into the business, right?
Yeah.
Of bringing them in and go, hey, look, we'll give you a guarantee for 30 days, and then we're gonna move you over to flat rate, right?
Yep.
And again, that's usually driven by somebody's pay plan, right? If the service manager or service director has that unapplied labor number, dinged off of their pay plan, then they're going to try to get rid of that as soon as they can. And again, that's our short-term thinking.
Yeah. And I don't want the people listening think, oh, Austin doesn't care about unapplied labor. No, I care a lot. Right.
Yeah.
But if I have somebody that just starts and they worked at a Jiffy Lube down the street, right, and they're doing oil changes. Okay. Hey, first week, no expectation. Second week, 5 hours. Third week, 10 hours. So we're just ramping it up and testing their capabilities. And, then there's mentor arrangements too that can help with that. But again, I think in our business, it's like, can we step back and take even a 3-month view or a 6-month view with this person and their career trajectory? And then those conversations like unapplied labor get a little more context in them rather than just a month to month thing.
Right. And that's exactly it. Right. It's not that Austin doesn't care about unapplied labor or that Dave Foy didn't care about unapplied labor when he was in a store. But it's that long-term view, and it's that context around what the unapplied labor is, rather than saying unapplied labor in July was X, you need to get that down. Being able to go into that, knowing that, hey, look, I hired 4 new lube techs that have almost no experience. For the next 6 months, my unapplied labor is going to be X each month.
Yep.
And by the end of the 6 months, it'll lower each month. And by the end of the 6 month, we'll be where we should be.
Absolutely.
But for right now, we're going to carry a larger number, as opposed to, no, it's just, it's,
Yeah.
it's
you
zero
gotta,
or nothing.
you have to treat it like an investment account, right? So you got to tell
Yep.
me where I'm investing my money when it comes to unapplied labor. And
Mhm.
I hope I'm investing it in these young technicians that maybe they were at a quick lube place and now they want to be certified and get ASEs and move up the ladder. And I'm going to put a plan in place, and I'll work it as hard as they want to work it.
Absolutely. And so I think we kind of covered this, but how do we balance that need for the consistent, reliable income for our team, with the need for performance and performance-based incentives that we know we need to have, right? Like any one of us, we're all human beings. Any one of us, if you just give us a number and it's a flat number, then sooner or later effort levels out, right?
Yeah.
So those performance incentives inside the store are extremely important.
Yeah, and I think we have to be smart. So my rule of thumb with the performance incentives, again, you have to be smart with the role and what percentage of time is truly devoted to revenue generating activities and how much of the time is not. Like, the advisor role, just in particular, so I can give more exact example, we really looked at our salary compensation and said, okay, what is in our area, what is an average cost of living that somebody can put food on the table, they can have a roof over their head, whether it's an apartment or a house, they can have a decent car payment, and let's make that the salary amount. And then let's back into our yearly based upon the expectations that we have for that role. So let's say our expectation is the advisor sells 300 hours a month, right? So we're gonna chart that out, and we're gonna say, okay, if they get there and if they have CSI, this is what the year-end comp potential is of the role. But you can't have people in customer-facing roles showing up with the pain and the embarrassment a lot of times of being behind on their bills, or having overdrawn on credit cards and different things. And I can't control what they spend it on, but I can certainly, as an employer, say, hey, here's your salary amount that I know is going to cover, so you can come in and be fresh and treat our customers well. So I think that was a huge shift in that role. For us, is just looking at it on a percentage basis of, hey, I want 70% to be salary and 30% to be commission, and then just kind of back into your number from there. So now going back to the risk profile, as an employer, the more I guarantee you, the more risk I take, right?
Of
so
course.
your earning potential is never going to be as high as if you come to me and say, hey, Austin, I'll work on a draw. Okay, cool. Then, I'm going to put a much higher earning potential on that role because I don't have the risk. Like you have the risk because you have to produce.
Right. Absolutely. And some people really want that. Right. Some people want that higher cap or unlimited cap on what they can make by what they can go out and produce.
And, quite frankly, there's some people that we've done some special pay plans for that as a dealer, we're winning because, hey, if I have a technician that I'm paying an hourly guarantee plus a flat rate, if he was just 100% flat rate, I might pay him more on the hour because, again, he's taking the risk. But, at the end of the day, he loves it because he knows what he's going to make as a guarantee, and we love it because, we get him at a good value. So it's a win-win. But again, constantly just know what your personalities are and know, truly what the role is worth from a guarantee standpoint and commission.
Absolutely. All right. And now before we move into segment 2, we have our quote of the week. It is brought to you by Parts Edge. Situational variables can exert powerful influences over human behavior more so than we recognize or acknowledge. And that is from, Philip Zimbardo. I got to stop using names that I can't pronounce. And he is the author of The Lucifer Effect, Understanding How Good People Turn Evil, right? Which is kind of what we're talking about here, right?
Back to pay plans.
how our pay plans sometimes make our people do things that we don't want them to do. And so that was segment 1 we just completed, which is what is it that we want the pay plan to do? And that was brought to you by Petra Automotive Products. And now, as we move into segment 2, which is how do we design an effective pay plan? And here's where we can get back to what you were talking about with parts departments.
Sure.
Before we do that, transparency in the effectiveness of a pay plan. What role does that have? And I take this from this standpoint. Gross profit is a very common pay plan component for service advisors, right? But advisors typically don't see what goes into how that gross is calculated, right? So it seems like a simple calculation to them, but there's a lot more things that can go into it that can change that gross profit, and a lot of things that they can't control at all on what the gross profit is, which unfortunately not every operator in our industry is a good operator, as in every industry is that way. Allows a pay plan to be manipulated. And so how do we deal with that transparency issue, and how important is it in the pay plan that whatever position it is, advisor, porter, parts department, technician, that they have a very clear way to see what they're paid?
Yeah, I mean, let's just look at it this way. There's one reason why people work for the most time is to get money to pay their bills. And so one of the worst things you can do as an employer is not pay them on time, not pay them the right amount. And again, you go back to, I challenge anybody listening to this to go to their different departments and say, what is your pay plan? Or to tell me right now, hey, what have you made this month? Or what are you going to make this month? Because that's going to give you a really good indication of if you have a good pay plan, if people understand the pay plan. We've tried to almost oversimplify the pay plans because, if somebody doesn't know what their target is, especially if they're in a commission driven role, they're going to be less likely to hit that target or less likely to strive for it. So the more confusing we make it, the harder it's going to be for them. And again, the less transparent. So, I think one of the good things with our process is, we're getting the payroll vouchers out a couple days before they actually need to be paid. That gives the general manager an opportunity to review those with all the employees. So I think it's a great best practice to review those payroll vouchers every month with your employees, because if you have a performance-driven role, you basically have a monthly performance evaluation right there, and you don't have to work hard at it because payroll department probably, came up with the numbers for you. You're double checking them with the employee. So now the employee knows what they've made. If they're not happy with what they've made, you real time right there can say, well, you were deficient in this area, let me help you with that. Or let me go talk to your manager and help you with that. So, I don't understand these dealers that, they pay someone off gross profit, Dave, but then they can't pull it. Like, they can't see what they're doing, or they can't see their hours at any given time. Like, it just makes no sense to me. So, I love to, if they don't have access to it, like, they need access to it. Every single number in their pay plan, they need to know where it's at any given time. They shouldn't have to ask somebody to pull it. They shouldn't have to go through 3 chains of command and not get an answer and have to remind somebody of it. Like, they should be able to calculate their own pay plan to verify what payroll has. And if they can't, you got an issue.
Absolutely. And I love what you just said about using that review of what they're being paid for the month as an instant coaching opportunity.
Because, hey, you set up the pay plan because you want it to drive the behaviors. So there's your scorecard right there. It is their pay plan. And it just blows my mind how, so many people, they don't take the extra couple minutes to go over it with every employee, employee. They're the biggest key to your success. So, general managers, fixed ops managers, service managers out there, like, use that whether it's a weekly payroll or monthly payroll, use that as a time to sit down and coach and check in with your people.
Yeah. And making it clear and understandable is super important. I can tell you, my first service advisor job was 1992, if you can believe that. And we used to joke, that we used to have the wheel of bonus. We had this little mini fan that we used to spin, and it used to have dollar amounts on it, because they would never tell us how you actually figured out the bonus. And then you'd have a month where you feel like you killed yourself and you get a $50 bonus check. And months where you feel like you did nothing and you got, a $500 bonus check. And then I've had places where I worked where, no lie, like, my thing was on they sliced a piece of paper, like it was printed
Yeah.
2 lines on a piece of paper, and they cut
Yeah.
it for me and cut it for the next advisor, and that's what I was given. And I've been at a place where the formula was so complex. It came on a full page printed out like Excel sheet thing,
Yeah.
with everything in it to get you to your
Yeah.
bottom number of what your and this was I was the director at this store. And there was a fixed ops director above me that designed this pay plan, and I had to try and every month. I was at that store 5 years, and almost every month I'm explaining it to an advisor who's been there for 3-4 years, because it was so complicated. And it's not effective.
Yeah, I mean, trust is one of the biggest things in the employee-employer relationship, and that's just if you have no transparency with the pay plan, again, like that's why people work is
Yep.
is to get that check. I would say 99.9% of people do, and so we have
Mhm.
to realize how important that is for people, and
Right.
and just how much that means to them.
Absolutely. And so let's talk about the pay plans and parts.
Sure.
So I don't know what you laid out. I've had plans that laid out where parts departments were the parts department employees were incentivized on the hours that the shop produced, so that they were incentivized to bring parts out to a tech to make sure the right part got ordered, to make sure that when a special order part came in, they went and told the technician, didn't just sit it on a shelf for weeks. What kind of things have you done to incentivize the parts department and really bring them into the game?
Yeah, I mean, I would say one thing too. I just want to be very clear on is I feel like in this industry we use pay plans to manage people a lot of times way too much, right?
Yep.
There's a reason we have managers in place. The managers need to manage people. So either you have a pay plan that manages somebody or you have a manager that manages somebody. So, with parts, we don't overcomplicate it. The only thing we've done is we just removed that barrier so that they're paid on both parts and service. We're not going to pay service on them both, but we pay parts on the whole thing. It's parts is largely an administrative role, right? So there's not a ton of revenue generation. I would say maybe special order parts and wholesale. I'm sure there's some stores on here that are killing it in wholesale, and they'll tell me, "No, we're generating a ton of revenue for that." Okay, I get it. But largely the role is very administrative. So I think that reflects a pay plan that's almost all guaranteed, but again, a little bit of a bonus structure in there off of total shop performance, or maybe it's a gross profit record, or we have a store of the year program here. So if they hit all the metrics within the store of the year program, they get a little bit, even tying them to CSI. So again, I never want to overcomplicate it, and I would rather have a pay plan. I mean, I would rather have a pay plan that's all salary than one where the employee has no clue, what's going on. Yeah.
I agree. One other thing on parts departments, if they sell online, as I do the shameless plug for OEM Interactive, the agency side of the business, that's what we do is marketing for those stores that sell parts online, which can certainly be a very lucrative business. But those are not always done under the name of the actual store that you're at. So, so that's I like the way that that you paid them on parts and service. They're now vested in making sure that the service department gets things done.
Well, now you don't lose jobs, when the service advisor goes back and, well, we don't let the service advisors go back anymore, but the service manager comes back and says, "Hey, I need a discount on this part. We have to get it done, or we got to find something else." They're not saying, "Well, I'm not paid on that."
Yeah.
Well, guess what? They're paid on the whole thing now. So,
Yep.
They'll sell some parts at a lower gross to get a deal. And I think that is maybe a positive mindset from variable department that we've tried to bring back into parts and services. Hey, let's get deals. Like let's negotiate, let's work with customers, let's see what we can get. And that pay plan has been it's been good, a good byproduct of that. And we've also done a little bit of cross training. So since they're paid on both, we have some parts counter people now that will go up front and sit at the advisor stations and help them from there. And I think that's something that came about when we switched this pay plan just naturally, was we had people wanting to do that and get up there. So I thought that was kind of a cool unintended consequence, I would say, of us making that switch.
Yeah, that's great. I never really thought about doing that with my parts team. I used to always do
Yeah.
it with the BDC. Anybody in my BDC was required to spend
Mhm.
4 hours every single week at the service advisor desk.
Yeah.
Whether we had an on-site or an off-site BDC,
Yeah. And I
you
mean,
have to understand.
yeah, with we have Techion as the DMS, so we can, basically any tablet can work,
Yep.
with that. So that gave us a ton of flexibility. They're not parts isn't tied to a desk anymore.
Right.
We have the tablets for them to use, so that had contributed a lot to that as well. They're able to move up and work from different places.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And that just reduces that separation, right? Now
Yeah.
they understand a little more what the advisor is going through, but they also get a little more relationship time to
Yeah.
actually understand each other as people.
Yeah, I mean that parts counter can cause quite a divide, right? And
Yeah,
anytime you're talking to somebody over a counter, not as much of a relationship as if you're sitting next to each other. So yeah, it's
very
those little
true.
things that matter. Yeah.
Yeah. It is a physical, literally a physical divide
Yeah.
that it causes between people.
Mhm.
And so you mentioned earlier a great point. We don't want the pay plan managing people, right? We want people managing people.
Yeah.
The pay plan is gonna drive behaviors that we want, but it's still not there to manage the people. And so what do we do when we have somebody who, whether it's parts tech advisor, whoever it is that's on an incentive pay plan, and they have the high metrics, right? They're putting out a lot of sales. They're a tech that's getting a lot of hours produced, right? But customer satisfaction scores, or in the tech world, fix it right the first time is not that great. How do we deal with those situations where the pay plan is working that one way but not
Mhm.
working the other way?
Yeah, I mean, look, in fixed operations, the CSI should be a component in every pay plan that we have to some extent, especially if it's some sort of a commission based pay plan. So here's what I would tell you. We're big on top grading. So it's a rating system. So A, B, C, and D players. So your A player is a high performer, high culture. Your B player is a high culture, but a lower performer. The C player is your high performer, lower culture, and then your D player you don't want is low on both. So I think the question you're asking me is, what do we do with extremely high performers that maybe are not good culture fits? And I would tell you time and time again, as hard as it is you got to move on from those people if they're not wanting to go the extra mile with your customers, because you're going to do way more damage. Again, long-term thinking, you're going to do way more damage with them making customers mad, giving customers bad experiences. They're telling their friends, they're telling their neighbors, and our communities are very small, especially with social media and online. You can't afford to have somebody there, although they're giving you the numbers this month that you want. I've seen it happen over the course of a few months. They gradually, their customers don't come back, and you can draw back to, let's say it's that advisor, or even that technician, but a little easier to say that advisor, that, hey, your customers aren't coming back for repeat business. Why is that? Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's because you forgot about that part of the experience. So I want to pay for the whole package. So I will pay more for somebody that doesn't produce as much, but within reason now, that doesn't produce as much, but has phenomenal CSI. Like, I'll pay more
Yeah.
for that because that's what I want.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole package.
Yep.
I can go hire these gunslinger producers, right? But
Right.
it's much harder to hire those people that are not only going to be a producer, a good producer, but also very good CSI. So that's how, especially the advisor pay plan, that's how we want it structured.
Yeah. I love that. So on the grading of the players, the ABCD,
Mhm.
are they typically, everybody's on the same pay plan? Are they on different pay plans,
No,
depending on the player level?
that's more of a management tool, right? So
Okay.
that's more of something that you would look at off pay plan to manage people. So you try to hire B players. Those are the people that you believe are going to be big, high culture fits. They're going to fit in well with customers and with employees, and then we can train the production aspect of it, right? So
Hmm.
it's very, very rare to actually hire an A player because, first of all, they don't really know your culture. So
Right.
coming in there. They also typically are producing at another place. So typically everybody's going to start as kind of a B player, and then you see where they go from there. But those C players is kind of what you asked about. They're high performers, but they're very a low culture, whether that's culture with customers or culture with employees. And those are the ones they're silent killers for any department that you have them in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the way you're looking at that, where you look to hire the B player. So you're taking somebody who's a proven performer, but has some room for growth, but is also good with customers,
Yeah,
which is extremely important. And sometimes you hear people saying that, they're just looking for somebody that's good with customers. That's
right.
terrific, but as an advisor, there's more skills that you need than just being good with customers. Yes, you need to be good with customers, and it goes a long way. But there's still other skills there. As like the stat you mentioned, that it takes 3 to 5 years before an advisor really
Yeah.
becomes skilled at their job. There's a lot to learn in that role.
Mhm. Yeah, and you talk about like extrinsic and intrinsic. I think these B players are ones that already have that intrinsic motivation of,
Mhm.
they're doing this for their family. Maybe they've been athletes, so like they've been trained in discipline. I
Yeah.
think that's one of the hardest things to coach and train is going to be that drive and desire, and honestly sometimes just a willingness to show up every day and be present. So,
Hmm.
those are things that just very simply can make a B player and can make somebody a good hire that doesn't necessarily have to do with a pay plan.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so we kind of touched on this, but what are some of the ways that we can tailor the pay plans for different roles, um, to make them more collaborative? And we kind of talked about this with the parts pay plans that you
Yeah.
use, right, to
Yeah.
make it more collaborative. Um, are there any other strategies that you're using, say, to make parts more collaborative with a tech, or a tech more collaborative with an advisor, or vice versa?
Yeah, so I mean, we've done, some of the technician pay plans. We're big on the multi-point inspection videos, and
Hmm.
the technicians don't necessarily get paid for those, but
Yeah.
we've been using that as an incentive in their pay plan. So really, if they check the box for us and they have a certain percentage of the videos, we give them a little retro bonus for the month, and what that does, it's going to help support the advisor activity, right? So
Sure.
I'm trying to drive a specific behavior. So with anything that I have that's going to be a motivator, I also have on the other side that's going to be something that we'll have conversations if that metric isn't hit. So whether you want to call it a minimum standard or
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever term you have for it. So like, these technicians have to be above 50% with their videos and
Hmm.
in order to be safe, right? And not be written up or have any meetings of communication. And then, hey, if they're 85% or above, awesome job. We're going to give you a little bonus on that because that helps support the overall mission of what we're doing.
Yeah, that's great. I had at one of the stores that one of the groups that I was at, rather, we had a plan where, and I don't remember all the pieces of it. There were three pieces of it, but one of them was technician videos.
Hmm.
And at the end of each month, if they hit those three metrics,
Hmm.
um, whatever hours that they produced in the month, a dollar for each of those hours was put into a bank for
Yep.
them, that we gave them at the end of November to,
Yep.
so if they wanted to use it for Christmas shopping or whatever. But it was a nice chunk at the
Yeah.
end for techs that produced. Some of those guys were taking a few $1,000s at the end of November that they now had, and it wasn't money withheld from their pay or
Right.
anything like that. It was just, this was found money just put
Hmm.
aside for them. But it served a couple of purposes. It kept them engaged all
Hmm.
year round in
Yep.
trying to get that money bank built up. Um,
Yeah.
and it got them doing multi points and the other pieces. I don't remember what the other pieces were, but
Hmm. Yeah.
kept,
Yeah.
kept them
Especially.
involved monthly and yearly.
Yeah, and I think why we moved to do that, and there's some other factors of some other pay plans that we have. It's like I need to drive a very specific behavior, so I can do it one of two ways. I can do it with a carrot or with a stick, right? And
Hmm.
so I try to kind of do it with both a lot of
Yeah,
times.
sure.
But I know that in order to get a great customer experience, I need those multi-point inspection videos. In order for the advisors to have those to go over with the customer, like where's my, square root of what my problem is? I need the technicians to do them. Right. So
Yep.
that's kind of how that bonus program came about. And I think why it works, because it drives a very specific behavior that is, the start of something bigger than what it is.
Yeah, because a lot of times you go into stores and you ask advisors why they don't sell things, and they'll tell you, well, techs aren't doing videos, right,
Yep.
or aren't doing a multi-point. And then you go talk to the techs, and the techs go, well, I stopped doing them because the advisors weren't selling anything.
Right.
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 So you have that catch-22, and I used to always tell them the same thing. I don't want you to worry about the advisor. I'll handle them. I'll give them the skills they need to be able to sell what you give them. But I need you to do your part and do the video or the MPI on every car. And then the same conversation happens with the advisors.
Yeah.
Don't worry about them not getting you a video. I'll get them to get you videos. You worry about selling.
Yeah, and like if we go back to transparency a little bit, just in that example, I think it's good for your technicians to know what your additional service recommendation closing percentage is, because if it's 25%, they need to understand that they're going to touch 4 cars and only one of them is going to sell stuff, right? So I think that perspective needs to be put out there of, I tell the technicians too, if you guys want to sell more, get out there with the customer, because you will.
Yeah.
Like, just
Absolutely.
by showing your face, right, you can take control of it. But again, I think that's maybe off pay plan, but the transparency piece of it is using those numbers to your advantage and saying, look, guys, you got to keep doing this stuff, because 1 out of every 4. So you do 4, only one of them is going to sell. Not every ticket sells something. We'd like to think it does, but
it would be terrific, wouldn't it? But Hall of Fame baseball players are hitting what, 300 something. So they're hitting 3 out of every 10. So it's a numbers game. You just got to keep putting it out there.
Yeah.
All right. Before we move into the next segment, the last segment, this segment was brought to you by Automotive Warranty Network Incorporated. Thank them for bringing you that section that we just talked about. And so, Austin, this brings us to segment 3, which was some takeaways for people. And before we get into that, because it's just me and you, so we're a little ahead of schedule, we're gonna do the stat of the week a little early. So, stat of the week is brought to you by Petra Automotive Products. And that stat says organizations with effective incentive pay structures saw a 15% increase in employee engagement and a 10% reduction in turnover rates. Again, the stat of the week is brought to you by Petra Automotive Products. And so 15%, if you have an effective pay plan, I couldn't find a stat of if you have an ineffective pay plan, what your reduction in production is. Somebody needs to do that study. I don't know how that would work, but that's a big jump when you think about the numbers that we're doing in each of these stores. Right? If you could get a 15% increase from your department. And
I think go back to, sorry to cut you off, but go back to that stat at the NADA, which I think is nuts. 3 to 5 years for an advisor to be like top tier. How many advisors do you have in your organization that have stayed that long? And,
exactly.
I think again, the more clear the pay plans are, we're not changing them all the time. It is what it is. It's simple, leads to, better retention, and which is going to lead to more, what we've seen is like more consistency, I would say. Shops aren't so hot and cold with people leaving. You got to turn customers away. Like you're keeping people there, and then you're able to kind of overstaff a little bit even too, and sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the hidden things that we don't think of with retention, when retention is low, obviously you have customers who are a little more uncomfortable because they come in, they've dealt with Austin the last 5 times they brought their car in, and now he's not there.
Yeah.
Our DMSs still leave a lot to be desired in tracking our customers' wants, needs, and all of that. So that customer who comes in that Austin knew couldn't do an appointment on Wednesdays. Now the new guy doesn't know that and offers them an appointment on Wednesday, and they're like, I can't do Wednesday, right? And it's a small thing, but it's still something that builds up. And the other intangibles, that one of the other intangibles that's there is maybe a car has been in for an issue 3 times, right? Not through no fault of anybody, right? It's just a weird problem that's coming up, and it's been the same tech that's looked at it those 3 times, and now that tech's not there. We're starting all over again. That tech knows everything that they've done. They know all the roads that they took it on to try and recreate it, all that stuff, and now we're starting all over again. And those are some of the things that we just don't think of when we lose people. That's production loss right there.
Yeah.
That's where we're doing things over that we didn't need to do.
Yeah. And I think like this gets into a very complicated leadership topic in terms of how long do you retain people? You know, and there's kind of that retention versus accountability piece. You know, it's kind of like the retrain, and then you got to part ways with them, right? But you know, we've talked about this so much. Is our one of our main focuses through the pay plans and through everything that we do is more retention with the employees. But you know, you don't want to retain the wrong people. And then it's the question of, well, when do we let them go? When do we, you know, retrain them? How do we put more resources into it? But you know, I think the fight is definitely worth it from what we've seen, and just being able to watch some of the careers that progress within the organization when they do support people makes it worth it. So again, kind of going back to that ASR example of, it's, you know, 1 out of 5 maybe are going to make it. You think about the management positions. There's not a ton of management positions out there. So you know, not everybody you hire is gonna be a success.
Yep, very true. I worked for a 6-store group at one point. This was many years ago, and the owner used to jokingly say that my best employees were my long-term employees. Yeah, and my worst employees are my long-term employees.
Yeah, it's such a double-edged sword, isn't it? Like, the experience means so much, and those relationships that they built with the customers mean so much, but you know, sometimes at the same time you wish you could replace them.
Absolutely. He used to love to say that to long-term employees too, and he would leave that big pause after their best employees, and they would start to say, "Oh, thanks, Jim," and then he would give them the jab. But anyways, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. It's just a funny anecdote. And so for takeaways for people, some of the essentials that a pay plan has that it just absolutely has to have to be effective for 1, the employee, 2, the customer, and 3, the company. And that's probably a long list, but just some of the pieces that you've got to have in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be clear, it has to be concise. You know, employee at any moment, like I said, needs to be able to pull where they're at. They need to be able to calculate their own pay with access that they have under their login and their system. And I'm kind of like beating a dead horse there, but you know, that is one of the top things, you know. And then the other thing to consider is, if you have roles where they're doing activities that aren't revenue generating, you know, make sure you take care of them. I think that was the biggest switch we've seen, even in the sales roles that we've started to do, much different pay plans there, which have a little bit more guaranteed, and you know, then the bonuses are structured a little bit differently. But you know, basically just making sure our employees come into work and we know that their reasonable living expenses are going to be taken care of, right? And then the commission comes on top of that. So I think these hybrid pay plans are definitely something to consider. You also, another thing I would tell you is do some research. So in our town here in Lafayette, Indiana, for instance, we have Subaru has a big plant here. Caterpillar has a big plant here. There's a big company called Arconic here. And so we're competing with some factory jobs that have some pretty high wages and really good benefits, right? So it is what you're offering competitive in the marketplace, right? I'm not going to offer somebody $25,000 less a year than what they could make at a factory and think I can get them. So, you know, being smart about that as well. But yeah, I think overall, just the transparency, and if every one of your employees knows exactly what their pay plan is and exactly how to calculate it at any given time, you're going to be way ahead. So the other warning I will throw out there is, if you switch pay plans, be very aware of, was that employee paid weekly and now I'm switching them to bi-weekly? You know, were they paid weekly and now they have a monthly commission check? I've had a lot of pay plans in this business, and I can remember a couple times very specifically where I was switched from, you know, what was more of a weekly guaranteed role, in sales, to a finance manager position. Well, then I didn't get a check for a month and a half.
Yeah.
because my commission didn't come till the 15th. So I think these
Yep.
are little mistakes I've made along the way that I think people can learn from. So just because, you're moving somebody, let's say, you're moving a master technician to a shop foreman role, and now you're putting him on a management pay. So now he's going to be commissioned. Now he's paid on the 15th for the prior month. You
Yep.
got to think about how you're going to cover that 6 weeks for him, because
Sure.
all of his budgeting for the last 20 years has been on a weekly basis of, $2,000 or whatever it is. And now it's like, well, I'm not really getting a paycheck for 6 weeks until that commission one hits. Right. So, again,
Yeah.
I think don't be afraid either to have conversations with your people and ask them for feedback on the pay plan.
Yep.
Because that's another thing that we forget. I think employees, a lot of times, they are reasonable, and we know through research what these roles pay, what they should
Mhm.
pay.
Yeah.
NADA has statistics, Bureau of Labor has statistics, so you kind of know that in number that you're trying to back into.
Yep.
Asking them for their input. What should we do with the bonuses? How important is CSI? What
Yeah.
what are your feelings about this? I think can give you a good guide, and I think at the end of the day, they're going to buy into your pay plans a little bit more if they have some input or feel like they have input along the way.
Yeah, and it absolutely makes sense because to spend all of that time behind closed doors putting together a
Yeah.
pay plan that you're going to put out that half of your team goes, "Oh man, this really scares me."
Yeah.
It doesn't do you any good.
Yeah,
You
and I
might as
think
well
too,
put it out there in front of them.
yeah, I think as dealers and managers too, like we do need to know, okay, what is a good performer in this role? And what does a good performer look like from a number standpoint, whether it's hours produced, gross profit, CSI, what's kind of a good, better, best, like we do tire quotes. And then,
Hmm.
what is an annual income, good, better, best, that we want to reward that. And I think that helps you too back into, what numbers you want to be at. But you got to be very clear with what good looks like, or what great looks like, or what average looks like in a role, and know what you're compensating for that.
Absolutely. I love that. Austin, this was a terrific discussion. This segment, our last segment, Takeaways, was brought to you by IntelliCheck, who is also our show sponsor for this week. Thank you, IntelliCheck. And Austin, thank you so much for being with us. Great discussion. Sorry, Jeff couldn't make it, but we'll get Jeff back on a different show. And aside, Jeff is actually working on pay plans for his team over the last 2 weeks. So he would have had some relevant information, but that's okay. Next week, we are talking about marketing yourself to benefit the industry, and we have April Simmons and Laurie Halter. April Simmons from Horn Automotive and Laurie Halter from Charisma Communications will be a great discussion about marketing, and more specifically about marketing yourself in the industry, and how that can help you and help your career. Austin, again, thank you so much for being with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. If anybody has any questions or wants to reach out more, you can usually find me on LinkedIn, or shoot me an email, or whatever. However you can get a hold of me.
He's not hard to find.
Yeah.
So again, thank you so much, and thank you again to all our sponsors, and we will see everybody again next week.